it's Halloween.
It's Halloween.
So exciting.
Yes.
Can't
It's
wait.
like, it is like really here. So like, tell the people what you've got planned. What have you got up? What's the house? How's the haunted?
Man. The
What's
house,
the vibe?
The house is ridiculous. My house has basically been covered. It's covered in. I mean, it's always covered in kind of spooky stuff, but it's especially covered right now. Our Halloween lights have been on nonstop for like, I'd say a good month. We're gonna carve our jack-o'-lantern tonight, and we've been watching scary movies nonstop. So I'm really excited. I can't wait.
Ooh, that's some good stuff. Any
it's gonna be
any
great.
good scary ones? Is Katie over it? Is Katie like, I'm done and I want Thanksgiving?
Katie's so over
Do
it.
you have her like, she's all covered in like that the transparent spider web stuff that you get at Target?
Oh, she's so over it. We have been. It's ridiculous. Oh my goodness. But yeah, it's. I'm really excited. How about you, Marie? What have you guys been up to?
Oh, well, like we're getting ready to deck out the front of the house. You know, we're gonna put up, like I said, we got like all this fake spider web, like seriously, like a whole trunk of the car filled with this white puffy stuff. It just looks like cotton that we're gonna try and string up everywhere. And then we debated on the giant spider, right? Because the giant spider's a classic. But we're like, you know what? It's gonna be kind of more subdued, more refined and dignified, if you will. And we're just gonna have like some lights, in lanterns and the spider webs, and just sort of mood. We're going for mood.
Oh, so exciting.
Instead of like open graves and body parts, we're going for mood.
Good.
Sophisticated.
I like it.
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty excited. I'm excited for you, Marie.
Dude, it is contagious. I have to say that I feel like this year especially, I'm on 11 for Halloween, and there's only one influence. There's only one influence around here about that, and that is the jack-o'-lantern, the jack-o'-lantern shirt wearing Christopher Cogswell.
All right, so this episode here, folks, we are doing, honestly, one of the things I find to be the most scary of all of the topics all the topics we ever investigate on the show. This to me is the most scary, besides maybe the Pleiadians thing, which we are going to do an episode on too, just because of the depth of lore, but also the scary level to which people believe this stuff, as shown by the recent spate of bombings going on.
Yeah.
So this episode, we are coming to the conclusion of our series on demonology and kind of satanic panic generally by discussing the satanic panic in modern mythology. So the satanic panic that goes on today. So we're going to kind of take you on a quick tour of the satanic panic, starting with Michelle Remembers, and then kind of jumping over to the modern versions of this story, which include Illuminati clones of the royal family and Britney Spears. That include Pizzagate. That includes QAnon. That includes all this stuff. That, again, not to put too fine a point on it, but people actually believe this stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
And the suspension of logic and the suspension of rational being able to take yourself out of a situation, I think is, like, to your point, the most scary thing about this is that it's cult-like behavior without really having that much of a set doctrine.
There's not even a leader.
Right?
There's not even a leader. Good God.
It's like the mass psychogenic event, right?
Absolutely.
Mass hysteria. Love that.
All right. Let's get into it. Jake, roll the terrifying tape.
Welcome to the Mad Scientist Podcast. This week's episode.
Okay, now, to start this episode, we need to say, just off the bat, because there's going to be people who will question this.
Mm-hmm. As well you should.
As well you should.
Don't just believe us because we say stuff.
No, not at all. However, I do want to say this off the bat. Donald Trump is not the source of this stuff, right? So we're not trying to be political here. In my opinion, Donald Trump is a symptom of this ultimately. And like, honestly, like almost all of our politicians in the last 20 years have been a symptom of this. It's the increasing level of partisanship. It is stoked, I think, mostly by the media and by religion, honestly. But I don't think it necessarily has to do with I don't even know how to fix it. Like, that's the scariest thing to me about this.
Yeah, I think it's just stoked by fear. Fear can come from anything, right? And fear is a part of human nature. It's a part of any kind of human response. You know, like, I think like it can come from the media. It can come from books. It can come from your family. It can come from, you know, what you believe to be true. It can become from not knowing something, right? Fear is always based from what is unknown to you, which is many things to many different people.
Absolutely. So the beginning of this really starts with Lawrence Pasder and his patient, Michelle Smith, who eventually became his wife, Michelle Pasder.
Crazy right there, right? Can we just say that's crazy right there?
A terrifying piece of info that doesn't get put into the books they wrote, surprisingly. Isn't that interesting?
What?
Now, Pasder was a psychiatrist in Victoria, British Columbia. He first became
Canada. We can really put this all down on Canada.
We absolutely can. It's all Canadians' faults. Now, his first wife, Marilyn, and he had 4 children, and then in around the late 1960s to early 1970s, or mid 1970s maybe, right? Mm-hmm. He became involved in so he was always a devout Catholic, right? But he really started to become interested in sort of religious ceremonies and seemingly like demonic possession or possessions, ideas like that, whatever. Okay. Now, he then started to dabble in hypnosis as part of his practice, which again at the time was not considered to be a completely wackadoo sort of thing as it is today. Because we just didn't know how terrible it could be until basically Pasder used it for this purpose. And so he began to see in 1973 a woman named Michelle Smith. And she initially came in for depression. And it was about 3 years after he started seeing her that she started to kind of show signs that there was something else that she was remembering, but couldn't really put her finger on. Mm-hmm. And what unfolded was completely disturbing story that is told in the book Michelle Remembers about her supposed ritual abuse at the hands of a theistic satanic cult. Yes. Now, the reason that
she was very young.
Right, when she was basically around 5 to 6. Now, the reason that we make the distinction between theistic Satanism and just Satanism proper, obviously, we just had an episode with 2 of the highest members of the Satanic Church. Lovely people. Totally fine, totally nice, right? Like, completely fine people. So, you know, they, again, with this panic, did not make that distinction because they honestly did not take the time to educate themselves enough to make that distinction. But so
Satanism to them at that point. Right?
Exactly.
You gotta have, it's all encompassing.
Now, some of the things that Michelle said occurred to her included being given basically she set the stage for all later satanic ritual abuse cases and all satanic ritual abuse kind of stories. She talked about how she was first taken away from her mother, and basically dehumanized. So they would tell her that she was horrible. She did all these terrible things. Basically that she essentially helped or caused a woman to be murdered, who they murdered in front of her. They then basically kept her chained up in a basement, supposedly forcing her to, basically live in completely squalid, horrible conditions. Forced her to defecate and urinate on the Bible and a cross, forced her to eat human flesh, forced her to do all these terrible, terrible things.
Drink blood at the altar of Satan.
And Pazder ate all of this up. There was no evidence for any of it. There was no, there was nothing there except for the word of this woman who Pazder eventually married. So it's it's very, it was very deep. It was very detailed. And a lot of the things that she claimed were things that could never have possibly happened. Right. So things like, they were using, they were murdering babies by the dozen in front of her. Or that, her mother and father, her mother especially, was involved in the abuse, right? Had been part of it. That a hospital that she stayed at was part of the abuse, that a nurse there was one of the main, Satanists that was doing these terrible things to her. And that specifically that it was the point of the assaults on Michelle were not to, were essentially to force her into believing that she was a vessel for Satan, and that basically caused her to become a Satanist herself. Right? This got so serious that she and Pazder, so Michelle and Pazder actually traveled to the Vatican to talk about this, and then they became something basically almost famous for their work.
Well, he's the guy who came up with the phrase ritual abuse, right? That's him.
Yeah.
Was Pazder.
That is him.
Yeah. Which is, it's insidious because, one, it takes away from children that are abused in a system by putting this entire mythology on it that is totally unsubstantiated by anything else besides this one person's account, which has been manipulated. And it also is insidious because it's sort of like, this is not what you go to a therapist for. Really, right? You go in thinking, you're having trouble sleeping, you're having some depression. And I don't understand. I think the thing that really interests me is what was the jar that got opened that decided what was going to come out was this entire story? How did what was actually ailing her get subterfuged into this? Because that's, to me, it's I feel like, because from this one case, this one story, this one very, very popular story, this is sort of like the genesis, patient zero for everything else that occurred within the next, the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah. Now, what's fascinating with this book, and this is going to come up again and again and again, is that this story tore her family apart.
Yeah.
And there's a part of this that is, we all have kind of the crazy uncle, the crazy aunt, whatever, who believes that, 9/11 was an inside job, or believes that, Obama's a reptilian, or believes that Trump is literally Satan, right? We all have those crazy people in our families.
Yes.
Who you just kind of ignore until Thanksgiving, and then you sit with it, right?
Yeah.
Imagine that. This, in some ways, it's so scary to me, is that in some ways this is the result of not checking those fantasies, right? No one ever said to Michelle, "This is not true." Okay, so this is from this is a quote from Zepper.org. So quote, and so this article here is from the Mail on Sunday, London, England, from September of 1990. The article is called "Michelle Remembers the Debunking of a Myth." Quote, but did Michelle, now aged 40, tell the truth? Did these things actually physically happen to her? Is Michelle Remembers, published in this country by Michael Joseph, and now being treated with such respect by a powerful child welfare lobby, fact or fiction? For the past 2 weeks, Mail on Sunday reporters have been investigating. Dr. Pazder, who has since been consulted more than 1,000 ritual abuse cases, who has since been consulted on, I assume, was reluctant to speak to us at length. He would not allow us access to Michelle, his wife, and star witness. He said, for Michelle to go on talking about these things is too painful. She is totally free of Satan today. She's a wonderful person, full of freedom and love. But every other witness we have interviewed described these happenings as the hysterical ravings of an uncontrolled imagination. Some, including a Roman Catholic bishop, gave Michelle the benefit of the doubt, that she did genuinely believe these things happened to her. But they are firmly convinced that, in real life, they did not and have to be explained as the workings of her subconscious. In the book, Michelle says she was first introduced to the Satanic ring by her mother in the basement of her home in 1955. She was just 5. Dr. Pazder conceals the family's true identity and home address. But, and they say that they have actually found the family. I'm not going to mention the names because I don't think that's necessarily fair. But so they say the first witness is Michelle's father, Jack. Jack, now 74, admits he was not the perfect father and it was a difficult marriage. But he is outraged at what Michelle and her psychiatrist have done to the memory of his wife, who died in 1963. It was the worst pack of lies a little girl could ever make up. The book took me 4 months to read, and I cried all the time. So did I, but not because it was a emotionally thing. It was just terribly written. I kept saying to myself, dear God, how could anyone do this to their dead mother? There never was a woman on this earth who worked harder for her daughters. There was no hanky-panky or devil worshipping. Mr. Proby itemized his examples 3 specific points where he says Michelle lied. Book, Michelle says she had no religious upbringing. Father, she went to church every Sunday with her mother and sisters. The 3 of them were confirmed together. Book, Michelle said she was twice poisoned during satanic rites. Father, she was treated for poisoning, but it had nothing to do with devil worship. Once she drank turps and paint mixture while I was cleaning my brushes. Another time she ate shoe polish. Book, Michelle describes a horrible car accident which was relived by the devil worshippers, in which Satan himself appears. Father, what I do recall was us once coming across a fatal crash in our car. We saw 2 cars smashed together and a woman lying in the road bleeding to death. Her intestines were hanging out and it was a horrible sight. Michelle started to scream and we could not stop her for ages. Dr. Andrew Gillespie, who was the family doctor, said, I believe it was something she pictured in a lot of conversations with Dr. Pazder and an overactive imagination. I remember her mother as a kindly woman. She died of cancer when Michelle was 14. There were several poisoning episodes in which the children got into mischief, but they were not serious. End quote.
I mean, did they even check to see if the house has a basement?
I don't even know. It's
it's
very interesting because, it's so similar to the QAnon stuff or the Pizzagate stuff or whatever, right? Yeah. Where there's just no evidence anywhere for any of it, right? And it just keeps getting pounded on and pounded on and pounded on until people just believe it, right?
Yeah. Well, what's so insidious is it's like a lot of this she came up with while she was under hypnosis, right? So she was being fed this by the psychologist.
Absolutely.
Psychiatrist? Yeah. By the quack, by Pazner. Like, and this sort of, sexual abuse, insidious, like, perversion came out of that. Yeah. Like, it had no, like, there wasn't any, from what you've just read and from what I've read, there's nothing in her background that had anything like that.
Yeah.
And that it was all this sort of like vessel and spoon fed for this horrific kind of, fodder that was ultimately also going to go forward and make money. Like, that's the thing. It's like almost like pornography. It's that kind of like, there's an insidiousness to it that's like, that is really evil, that's really wrong. And it's like, I feel like she went in seeking help and, needing and, trusting someone, and the person she trusted ended up doing this to her and ripping her family apart. Right. Mm-hmm. But then also, like, she ended up having sort of this weird, sick relationship where she married him.
Well,
and that's crazy.
It is
flipping a table over here.
No, it's messed up. It's completely disgusting, right? I mean, the Dr. Pazder should have been tarred and feathered. Like, I have no sympathy for him at all.
No.
Now, that book came out in like 1986, 87, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
That then led to a tremendous fear across the world. Now, we've talked about the Satanic Panic a little bit before, but here's some of the stuff here that was actually given out at the time by governments and by schools, by police officers, right? Things like that. So this is from a document called this document is called Satanic Cult Awareness, presented by Galen W. Hurst, PhD, and Robert L. Marsh. So this is a training manual for basically teachers, law enforcement, whatever.
Nice.
Okay.
Good training manual.
Now, this is who they put on their recognition list here of people. So Dale Griffiths, PhD from Tiffin, Ohio. Detective Sandy Gallant Daly of the San Francisco PD. Lieutenant Larry Hones of the Boise, Idaho PD. Sergeant Jay Hill of the San Diego PD. Kurt Jackson of the Beaumont, California PD. And Gary Bradford and Jim Craig of the U.S. Defense Investigative Service. These are some of the things. Now, this is a real document. Okay, so this is going to sound ridiculous. This is real stuff.
And what year is this from, really?
This is from 86.
Ah, okay.
All right, right around there.
Yeah.
Actually, wait, you know what? I think that's another document that I'm going to read after this. This one is from, hold on one second here. This one is from around 1993. I want to say around 1990, 1993.
All right, so yeah, okay.
Okay. So, this is all about cult indoctrination, right? Things that might be a sign that your kid is involved in a satanic cult, stuff like that. All right. This is insane. Okay. So hold on here 1 second, Jake, as I do this. My goodness, where is this thing? Okay, here it is. I highlighted. Okay. Signs of pagan and satanic practices amongst teenagers. You ready, Marie?
I am.
We're gonna see how many.
I have a tween.
Okay, we're gonna see.
I want to make sure I'm going to be on the lookout.
Well,
my husband might be. He's highly susceptible to stuff.
I was gonna say we should check this off for Paul and myself. Profile.
Sure.
Male.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Intelligent but an underachiever.
Yeah.
Creativity. Curiosity beyond norm. Low self-esteem. I am full of myself, so I don't know if I hit that one. Middle.
I was gonna say you are fine. Never mind.
Middle to upper middle class family. Difficulty in relating to peers. Boredom. Alienation from family and religion.
Listening to that punk rock music.
Okay, early.
Is that on there?
Just wait. Early phases. Abnormal level of stress, anxiety, and fear. Feelings of inadequacy or loss of control. Now, signs of active involvement.
Basically, puberty, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's puberty.
Yeah. Hair in weird places, right? Check. Signs of active involvement. Obsession with fantasy role-playing games.
Oh.
Obsession.
Oh, that's trouble.
Obsession with heavy metal music.
Oh.
Books on a cult.
Oh, dude, they got your number on that.
Objects used for spells or rituals. So this includes candles, pentagrams, inverted crosses, symbols, in parentheses 666, stones, powders, oils. So I got all of that stuff. Symbolic jewelry, which I don't know. I don't wear any jewelry. Excessive and unexplained paranoia of the world. Excessive? Like what's a normal amount of paranoia of the world?
Yeah, what kind of threat level would we have to be at to not have it be excessive? Yeah. Is there like something over red? Is it like maroon is like excessive?
And then extreme secrecy, self-mutilation, usually razor slashes, and fear of discussing involvement.
Involvement in what?
Just involvement. I'm assuming involvement in the cult.
Just involvement in like you don't want to play kickball. I mean,
so you got a kid. So you have a kid. Okay, you got a kid.
I got a kid
who is in a role-playing games. He's into heavy metal music. He's reading spooky books that you and your wife find terrifying. He is wearing
Stephen King.
Right, he's wearing dark colors, all this stuff, whatever. And
slams his door a lot.
And then
you get me, Mom.
And then you ask him, "Are you in a satanic cult?" And he's like, "What?" And you're like, "Oh, it's the last checkbox." Ridiculous.
See, that is what I love about that, because what they just described there is puberty.
Absolutely right, exactly.
That's like every single person. And the thing that's really kind of effed up about that too, by the way, is like they slip a few things in there that are major concerns, like cutting.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, that is a sign of something that needs to be addressed, but has nothing to do with a satanic cult.
No. Now here's some.
Okay.
Here's some of the symbology they say to specifically be on the lookout for.
All right. Okay. Good.
So first off,
gotta be up on it.
Okay. So the horned hand is the sign of
pictures of kittens hanging off of trees, hanging their baby. No. All right.
The horned hand is the sign of recognition between those who are in the occult. It may also innocently be used by those who identify with heavy metal music, which we just said like 20 pages ago was a sign of the occult.
Yeah, there's no innocent identification with heavy metal.
No.
All heavy metal is Satan's domain.
Okay. Zozo, symbol for three-headed dog, protector of gateway to hell, nickname of Jimmy Page.
Well, I was gonna say, what are you talking about? That's some Led Zepp.
The symbol yin yang represents male, female, night, day, black, white, and good, evil.
So that too, they're now just gonna go. We're just gonna lump in we're gonna go xenophobic, and we're just gonna lump in everything.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
AC/DC, symbol for Antichrist / Devil's Children, also a heavy metal music group. In parentheses, note the lightning bolt.
Note
Okay.
the lightning bolt.
Symbol for Twisted Sister, a heavy metal music group.
Oh, barely.
Ozzy,
Really?
Ozzy's name, symbol for Ozzy Osbourne, madman of heavy metal.
Okay, I'll give you Ozzy.
And then Kiss, symbol for Kiss, a heavy metal musical group. Note the double lightning bolts for SS, or obviously the Nazi SS, which they also say is a terrible thing here, which that one they got right. But ridiculous.
Wow.
This was given out to police officers.
Wow. So, and here's the funny thing is a lot of those police officers probably listened. Like, Led Zepp? Are you kidding me? Ozzy, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I can't believe it. Like, I get it. I get why this gained momentum. I get the idea of sort of this mass contagion event where you're just going to be, it's just, it is almost like this hysteria, which, it's not, it's more, it's not hysteria as in, anyways. But I just don't get, like, if you were, let's say you're a cop, right? You're, and you listen to this and you love this music. Are you like, at some point, are you like, am I a devil worshiper and I just haven't known it? Or is this full of it? Like, when do you sort of break, like, when do you have the, like, besides your teenager or your tween being like, Mom, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. And you're like, aha! I mean, I'm sorry. I love it. I love it. They lump all their metal together too. Like, I love it. They put in like
Twisted Sister and Kiss.
Twisted Sister and Kiss and AC/DC. Okay, so there's just, like, none of those bands really have anything to do with one another.
No.
So you can kind of like put them under that, but it's not even right. That's what's hysterical about it. And I think the other thing that is just, again, so insidious about this is it is enforcing the idea not to listen to kids, right? That whatever they're going to tell you is not true. That they're going to deny it. That they're having problems, and they're going to deny being in a satanic cult.
Well, the thing is, though, too, it's like a weird mix of things, because it's both you don't believe kids. It's essentially you believe kids when they're saying what you want them to say. Right?
Which is never.
No. No, which is never the way to go.
Never going to say, well, that's exactly it. It's like, there's massive, like, that's just so wrong to start to like push that.
It's so interesting because it does kind of, the thing is too with a kid, and people know, we now know this from talking to kids and figuring out how to kind of psychologically ask them questions about these things that are very challenging. Is kids are very easy to lead on. They're very easy to get them to say what you want them to say. And so, it's kind of a weird thing, because on the one hand, you do want to believe kids, you want to believe victims when stuff like this comes out. But on the other hand, it's so easy for it to turn into a witch hunt, right? It's so easy for it to turn into something untrue or unfair or not couched in the right way, that it's so scary. It's so scary that it could turn into this. Especially
kids that are vulnerable.
Absolutely.
That have sort of attachment issues will help fortify a story like this if they feel like that's something that somebody wants to hear. And that's what's even more effed up. It's like, these are people, young adults, teenagers that need that need help too.
Absolutely.
In some respects, and it's just like, oh my God. And then you've got like everyone else like listening, or a large percentage of just just your general, anxiety-ridden teenagers that are freaking out about everything anyways. And then this rolls in there as well. It's amazing.
It's very interesting. Now, here's the thing. All of this stuff seemed to have ended. Mm-hmm. A lot of us think that this stuff ended in the 80s, in the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Along with Twisted Sister. Dee Snider went down and he was like, you know what? I'm calling it. It's over. We're calling off the satanic cults, people. We're done.
Now, here's the thing. It never went away. Never. It never stopped. It's still here today. Now, why do we say that? Okay. What essentially happened, it's kind of what we do in science in a weird way. It is the proof by proving the negative or proving the inverse.
I was thinking you were going to say sacrifice kittens, and then I was going to be like, oh my God! No. It is Sorry,
like,
folks.
It is basically, if you can't prove that God exists, maybe you can prove that Satan does. And if Satan exists, then God has to exist. And so for a lot of people, Satan is a very real thing. They are a real being who is out there trying to trick you. And we see that in the kind of blossoming of evangelical belief systems.
Yes.
We see it in the blossoming of various conspiracy theories.
Oh, yeah.
And we see a lot of these ideas get morphed into our own modern day kind of ideas about things like, say, the Illuminati or Pizzagate or QAnon.
Yeah.
So the modern day Illuminati story really comes from the satanic ritual abuse panic of the 1980s. Okay, so here is a list of and this by the way is from 2006, this article. Okay. This is from the ASCA. Okay. Which is by this article is by Frida Briggs, the Emeritus Professor in Child Development of the University of South Australia, and Dr. Mary O'Neill, a psychologist, a clinical and forensic psychologist. Okay. This is a paper that says that satanic ritual abuse is real and occurring in Australia today. Again, this came out in 2006. The article is Ritual Abuse and Torture in Australia. Okay. Common themes in ritual abuse. These themes have been drawn from the personal experiences of the authors, as well as clinical studies, case histories and testimony of clinicians, and surveys, and etc. Survivors of ritual abuse and sexual abuse are advised that this list is extremely disturbing and should only be read with the support of a support person present. So violent rituals that include mock marriages, mock funerals, fake surgeries, ritualized torture, props and symbols being used such as blood, knives, altars, circles, animal parts, human parts, fire, corpses, ropes, pentagrams, etc. Supernatural beliefs, so beliefs in the omniscience of perpetrator group, belief that perpetrators have magical powers, etc. Simulations of the death experience, terrorization, bonding mechanisms, so victims are given new parents, victims are rescued by good perpetrators, or they're forced to perpetrate violence against other victims. And then extreme secrecy is the other big one here, right? So operant conditioning and psychological coercion used to enforce silence of victims, code words used to refer to perpetrators, abuse, places of abuse, drugs used to disorient victims, blindfolds, capsaicin spray is what I think they meant to write here, in the eyes to blind victims. All of those this was written by a real psychologist. Okay, someone who was looked upon favorably in their field.
Yeah.
Those are
published.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Published paper. Peer reviewed.
In particular, the use of code words to refer to perpetrators, abuse, places of abuse, drugs used to disorient, etc. Very, very reminiscent of Pizzagate.
Yeah. And that's
right.
Yeah. Totally.
So the idea here generally, there's a couple of different strands of this that go out there in kind of the world. The major strand is this idea that the world's rich and powerful are essentially involved in a tremendous amount of human trafficking. They steal children or are given willingly by parents who are in the Illuminati or in satanic cults or whatever. The children are then given to the rich and famous and then used for a period of time, after which they're brought back to their parents, brainwashed in some way, and then left with the repressed memories, but they don't remember them until they're adults or whatever. And that's kind of it. That's kind of the whole idea. On part of that kind of branches out in other weird ways, right? So there's a guy online who swears that Queen Elizabeth is a clone master. So the guy's name is Donald Marshall. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He
I
has
heard of this one.
So this is one of his from one of his Facebook posts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is on the
Queen Elizabeth. Right?
Yeah,
Queen Elizabeth
absolutely.
As in, okay. All right.
So this is on the anti-Illuminati and Freemasonry Facebook page, which is liked by 44,000 people. Okay. He says, quote, "The royal family of England, yes, Queen Elizabeth, Philip Duke of Edinburgh, and Prince Charles are the worst of them. Unbelievable, depraved perverts, all showing off the celebrities that go there. Elizabeth has the children there call her Lilibet and does ungodly things to them. Some she fakes being nice to, some she is terrible to, cutting them with swords while they scream. The decent people that are there against their will are afraid to say anything against them. Most have their children there as a kind of hostage, to be torn apart if they even think of informing anyone. But as they have been torturing me terribly anyway, I will tell all. Vladimir Putin loves to put the fear of torture and death into people, but is essentially a cowardly pervert himself. Most of the famous people are ashamed to speak or be seen by me there very much as they're ashamed of the perverse and disgusting gatherings. I am a decent person and will not participate in these acts, so they use me as an example and torture me for my being a good person." He also believes that Britney...
Does it have anything about her corgis?
I don't know. I actually don't think so. He also believes that Britney Spears is a clone who was murdered because she would not do these things. So is Eminem. Okay. Oh. So is Miley Cyrus.
Slim? Oh.
Yeah. So this is what he says about Miley Cyrus. This is Donald Marshall, July 31st, 2013. Miley Cyrus was talking at the cloning center last night, saying that she is going to be needing songs and that I will be making them. I said, "No, I'm not going to be making any more songs." She said, "Yes, you will." I said, quote, "Miley, you are going to be in some lot of trouble in future for keeping silent about an alien body-snatching crisis," end quote. She said, quote, "I'll just say I was scared. Aliens, hello," end quote, and she chuckled. I said, "Yeah, but how long do you remain silent? 10 years, 20? When are you going to tell people?" She said that I was scared. I then said, "Are you going to tell people that your fear of Vril caused you to stand in front of me with a knife and demand songs or you'd stab me?" She hesitated, looked around at the stands as if looking for an answer. Then she said through gritted teeth with slitted eyes, "You're going to die, motherfucker," in like a whisper. I said, "That's some appreciation." She just stared at me and put on an evil smile. I said, "I hope in future when people finally rise up and start cleaning the mess that they burn you people. Burn you in the street to death."
So, let's unpack that. So I think on several levels, one, like clearly you have people that need help, right? That this is what their belief is. This is what their mind is telling them is true, and that is a disorder, right? That's treatable to an extent. That can be diagnosed with modern Western medicine. And it can be treated, right? Like that's schizophrenia. That's something that is compelling this person to act this way. And then there's the whole narrative that fits into that. That's sort of the overarching umbrella that's driving, or that's feeding the machine that somehow triggers that and helps kind of put that into being in somebody's head, which is the idea of the Illuminati, or the idea of this. I admit I had not heard this about the Queen Mum, which is really, really good. But like all of these things are just like, even when you were talking and sort of just like, again, about the the idea of this coming to fruition in the 80s, and the idea of the evangelical entering the political stream more, or the idea even of like when we talked about the forever war, right? The idea that that nothing's right, that everything you're constantly under siege from something. And it can't be a rational thing, because then it could be solvable or treatable, right? If it's something as far out as, us arming ourselves forever because we can never back away from that, or the Queen Mother, cloning Miley Cyrus, who's demanding hit songs from people at knife point. I mean, really, like, there's no place to go from there. You got nothing. Like, there's no remedy. There's nothing coming out of that we're going to be able to solve, right? And that's the thing that I think is amazing, is when people can make sense of things like this, or when people can make sense of, like, Pizzagate or QAnon or 9/11 as an inside job. It's like, how do you even stop something, or how do you even, like, circumvent, or even, I don't even know. It's like, you can't. That doesn't exist. That logic doesn't exist in that world.
What's interesting, I think, is that, and I've actually heard this mentioned on last podcast on the left. They talk about how, in the 90s, in the early 2000s even, you had to go looking for stuff like that. You had to, like, I Googled, I knew that guy's name because I remember it happening in 2013.
Uh-huh.
But, like, I just Googled that guy's name and it came up, right? I could have Googled Queen Elizabeth clone and I would find, hundreds of pages that agree with that guy, right? Whereas before, you had to go looking, like, to find real hardcore conspiracy stuff, or to find real kind of hardcore alien stuff or whatever. It was a lot harder. Today, anyone with a phone, anyone with a laptop, anyone with a Wi-Fi open connection can access this stuff, can sign up for newsletters, can get involved, and it just magnifies the voice and the problem, because there is no stop to it.
Yeah.
Right? It's constant levels of fear. I mean, this is the thing, right? Alex Jones, it's not like Alex Jones was more sensible when George W. Bush was in office, right? It's not like he changes his tune when there's a Republican in office. He is not partisan, really. He's a nutcase. So it just
capitalist. Capitalist.
I mean, really though,
hardcore money. Yeah.
It's just conspiracist, right? Like there's always a conspiracy. They're always coming to get you. you're always in danger, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not the Democrats, it's the deep state Republicans. If it's not the deep state Republicans, it's the reptilians. If it's not the reptilians, it's the Illuminati. If it's right, so, and it just builds and builds and builds to a crescendo point where it feels, there were real news anchors. There were people on national television talking about how these bombs were fake this week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I had people at work tell me, I think that stuff might be fake. Right? Like that, and not even in a way that it's like, I think the guy's crazy. I don't think he meant the bombs to go off. People being like, I wonder if Soros sent that bomb. Like, that happened. That's real stuff happening in this world. So it just, the barrier to whacked out conspiracy is so low today.
Well, it's sort of the conscious dissolving of established norms too, in some ways. Like, things that I don't think that you take for granted if you don't have them tested in some ways. One is like, I think even during, like, after 9/11, to say that 9/11 was an inside job was just insidious. Like, that was like, I remember people being really outraged and really offended, even if they didn't, even Democrats who maybe didn't think very highly of George Bush at the time, felt like, what, an American government would not do that. Even if I disagree with the political party, they would not do that, because that's a line we're not crossing, because that's fiction, right? Or that the FBI and career law and order people that have given their time and their life and their, hours and family to protecting the country would fake things, or would lie, or would subvert democracy. I think that these are things like you can't really reason with, because you haven't ever had to before in some ways. That I think, and that's what's so hard. It's so hard to think like, well, I cannot believe that George Soros would send himself a bomb. I can't believe that is even something that we are saying could happen. And I don't think that that's necessarily, I think it is born out of fear, and I think that your fear is being fostered, but I think it can be a contagion anywhere. It can come up through anything. And that's what makes it so hard, because you just don't know how to, like I said, you don't know how to combat it, and you don't know how to make sense out of it, because you can't get out of, it's a closed loop. You can't get out of it. There's nothing to come out of with something like that. Well, if you believe Pizzagate, then it's very hard to understand how you wouldn't believe Pizzagate.
What kind of hurts, or what hurts, I guess, what kind of scares me, I think, with all of this is it's reminiscent, I think, of sort of, you wonder about, say, like the fall of Rome, right?
Yes.
Or the fall of any other kind of major world power. I mean, there really has not been a sort of, there hasn't been as spectacular a collapse as Rome, I think. You know what I mean? Maybe, I guess you could say the collapse of
Mesopotamia.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
documented, yeah.
Right, kind of well documented in kind of the modern age that wasn't immediately superseded by another civilization. Right? Like, I think you can argue that Mesopotamia's collapse was kind of then a lot of that, diffused over to, say, Egypt, and then a lot of that diffused over to kind of the Egyptian, Roman, Greco-Roman kind of Mediterranean, right? With it feels like it's coming to a head. Do you know what I mean? It feels like it's coming to a head, and not only that it's coming to a head, but that I think there is something to be said almost about these periods in time where I think the thing that's kind of missing here is there is no moral, and I don't even mean this in the way that it's going to sound, because it's going to sound ridiculous, but there almost is like no moral standard that we hold ourselves to anymore, right? We don't think that lying is not considered a bad thing. It's just considered a thing that happens. We always assume that people are trying to trick us. But we should expect, or we should hope for better than that, I think. And it's naive, I think. I think that's the problem with, say, I think that's the problem a lot of people have with, say, the Democratic Party's view of this, or the kind of the more liberal side, is that the assumption on that side is that people won't lie to you, that people on their own are good. And I think that's kind of why I think a lot of people, including myself, gravitate more towards, say, almost a libertarian viewpoint in some ways, where people are terrible. People will lie to you. People will try to take advantage of you.
People suck.
No, but I mean, but seriously though, we assume that we put these conspiracy theories out there, and we don't want to say these people are stupid, or they're damaged, or this is wrong, or whatever, because we just think, well, it's just their own thing or whatever. And then, a guy sends pipe bombs in the mail because no one's ever checked him on his stupid beliefs. Like, people, I hear you. I think the scariest thing about all of this, to me, is the kind of, and I say it a lot on Facebook just because I really do find it very terrifying, the democratization of facts. We have this idea that it doesn't matter if your neighbor believes in lizard people, or that the guy down the road believes that, the queen is a clone machine or whatever. She's a giant ant or something.
She's a clown machine.
Like,
and she won't. Sorry.
We just take it to be like, it's okay that these people believe this stuff, but it's infectious. It spreads, and it turns into these kind of things where You know, but it's like, but then on the other hand, you get to like, but do we want to censor people? Like, how is our only result downfall, Marie?
So, but I think I get what you're saying, and I get the concern behind it. I think step back and like look at what America has been through. I mean, America in the 1950s and 60s in the South went through a huge turmoil, a huge thing that that we basically tried to silence the voice of an entire group of people and thought that we could, and thought that, and that must have felt, to both the South as the established, that's how they saw their world, and to freedom and civil rights that are due to an entire group of people, that must felt like just everything was coming asunder, right? And has that resolved? No, but it hasn't. It's changed, and it's, and the idea of racism maybe has become more, more systemic, and it leads to things like this. But it's addressed, and it did not destroy the democracy, right? Or the idea of like the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was one of the first hugely televised events where we saw what we were doing to another country. We saw what we were signing up for, and we didn't know if it was right. That must have tore at people's souls to go into fight and to have that, and to come back and not be welcomed by a nation, or not know what was going to happen next, or know if your government was telling you the truth or lying to you. So I feel like this is sort of, we're in some ways myopic because it's happening now and it's happening to us. And it is bad. Don't get me wrong. I don't think what's happening is good. But I also think that something like this will always happen to test the strength of what you've put in place. And you have to feed the democracy to keep it going. Like you have to still put out facts. You have to still, strive for education and democracy, and treating people fairly, and not treating people with good, and not assuming the worst. It's like, to me, it's like, that's, maybe I'm old fashioned. Maybe it's just me, but like that's where I find sort of comfort when I start to get a little bit too crazed with lizard people thoughts.
Well, so here's the thing, right? I think that honestly, a lot of people have the feelings that
warm hug didn't work for you.
No. Well, so okay. So here's what I'm saying, right? I think that a lot of the anxieties that we're talking about here, about what is right, what is wrong, about all this other stuff, whatever, those are the feelings that breed this kind of conspiracy theory in the first place.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. They breed racism, sexism, anything that's going to keep somebody apart from you, or keep someone down or misunderstood.
Right.
In general.
So what is interesting in the modern day is, since 9/11, since the introduction of the internet, since all this stuff, I don't know if there's not really a great deal of academic study on this.
Can we blame Google?
But it seems like there is an uptick in people that believe in the satanic ritual kind of conspiracies, right? So one of the books that I actually read to get prepared for this series, right? I didn't read it. I listened to it on Audible. And when I say that I read books on Audible, my wife gets very annoyed.
She doesn't believe that Audible. She thinks that it's not as good as reading.
No, I don't know. Just that it's not like the right word, I guess. I don't really know. The book that I read to was The Ritual Abuse Secrets of the Illuminati by Archangel X.
Damn. Maybe she was just mad because you were reading that. Maybe. Like Catcher in the Rye or something worth your time.
Maybe.
Their eyes were watching God. Something that's worth it.
In that book,
the lizard people come to my front door. Bye.
By Lizard Man 12.
By Lizard Man 12, they took away my name.
So,
and I am known only now by my number.
In that book, he or she, whoever wrote this book, talks about how they were worried about the world, about the state of the world, whatever. They found themselves getting more and more panicked, more and more anxious. They couldn't sleep at night. They were having terrible nightmares, all this other stuff. And they went online and started reading about satanic ritual abuse. And what they found was that a lot of the things that they were having dreams about, dreams of, figures in cloaked hoods stabbing them or doing terrible things, or they themselves doing terrible things, these people online said those are indicative of you being part of a satanic cult.
Damn, yo.
And if this guy is to be believed, I say guy because it's narrated by a male, but if this person is to be believed, they came to the realization.
Can you imagine being the actor, the voice actor, and you're go into Audible and you think you're gonna get I don't know, some Clancy novel maybe or something, and they're you're going to read I was kidnapped by a satanic cult of lizard people, and you're
can't be easy. Not a good day at the office. Not a good day at the office. So what this guy said was that he came to ultimately believe, through the help of his therapist, his hypnotist, that his wife, his kids, all of his neighbors, everyone was involved in the cult. That his entire community was a satanic cult. Exactly.
Truman Show.
It is like the Truman Show. And so he talks about in the book, I left my wife. We're divorced. I am suing for sole custody of my kids because he believes that she is sexually abusing them because she's still part of this cult. And not only that, it is that they don't remember it because of the cult's programming. So that they're saying, no, this didn't happen to me, is part of the feedback loop that to him says they're really part of it then.
Yeah. First of all, we should talk to Audible about is this self-published? Could we be doing this type of stuff? Because I don't think that that's necessarily something that got by an editor. But
I didn't even consider that. I didn't even consider that. What are they letting on Audible?
You're what? Audible's just putting out anything now? It's that's why we have a podcast, so we can just spout off with whatever. It's if I thought that we could be having this being hawked by Audible, don't you think I wouldn't? I don't know. I feel a lot of it is mental illness. A lot of it is, or a lot of this sort of symptom of the paranoia, the prosecution, the sense that the fear, the anxiety, that's something that's biological, that can, like I said, hopefully be treated and should be the thing is it's with all this crap that they're putting on top of it, they take away from really demystifying mental illness.
Right.
And taking away that people that have mental illness are not inherently violent. They're not inherently less than someone. They're not inherently anything else, and it's a treatable thing. It should be a treatable thing, and it should be, insured as such and managed as such.
Right. Well, it comes down to kind of what we've talked about in previous episodes, where think about how differently this guy's life, if we were to believe his book, self-published book on Audible.
Is that a thing?
It's totally a thing. If think about how differently their life could have gone had they gone to a reputable psychologist.
Yes.
Right? And that's kind of, I think, though, part of this story overall too, is that it's not just, there are psychiatrists, there are therapists in the United States right now who treat satanic ritual abuse, who specialize in the treatment of this and will treat it as if it is real. Right? That paper we read from 2006 Australia. It's not that long ago. So the idea that this, it's not, so to phrase it differently, I guess my point, it's not just wackos on the internet writing about this stuff. This is still taken seriously by your neighbors, by your friends, right? Like by your family members. I mean, it's fascinating.
Well,
So
it's propagated, right? That's the other thing. If you've got a psychiatrist that's putting you under hypnosis, still hypnosis in this day, it's like, to your point, that's not, that needs a little bit of
yeah, that's not kosher.
yeah, it's not copacetic, but it's like that's, and again, it's like it's the furthest thing, like it's the most crazy improbable story that lands on it. And that's the thing that I find so amazing as well, is it's not like, oh, I had my parents left, I had anxiety about my dad's divorce, and then whatever, right? It's not sort of this, I hate to say more mundane, but like this more normal anxiety of what people go through in their life they end up in therapy for. It's the most extreme. I mean, you might as well be up there with like, I'm a wolf man.
Yeah, no,
I'm a werewolf.
It's
the moon turns. I was bitten. I mean, you might as well just go with that.
yeah. So
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, you're absolutely correct. It's
how do we sign up? Get some time on Audible, self-publish a book, and and sort of start cashing in on the ritual abuse. But just instead of ritual abuse, be like, I am a werewolf and I feel misunderstood.
I don't know, Marie. So why don't we? So all of this stuff is kind of out there floating in the world, right? It's on the internet. You can find it all, whatever. It hasn't really, I would say, the difference of the Satanic Panic versus, say, normal kind of conspiracy stuff was, I think, it crystallized and started to abut into the real world. Yeah. You started to see these things actually occurring. And we start to see it today, too, now with Pizzagate and QAnon. So, Marie, do you want to give kind of a quick rundown on what is Pizzagate?
Oh, my God. I have to think about it. But Pizzagate basically is a conspiracy theory that... oh, crap. Hold on, Jake. I'm going to have to Google it. Seriously. Well, that's so I will start by saying that is one of the things with Pizzagate. It's like, I don't always understand what it is. It's the idea. So the idea of it is, the conspiracy is that high up government officials, such as the Clintons, are running a human trafficking, child trafficking, out of a pizza parlor.
Yeah, so
in
DC. In DC.
Okay.
It's Comet Ping Pong Pizza in DC. Now, on top of that, too, it's the same.
Okay.
It's the same satanic ritual tropes, right? It's powerful people.
Yes.
Take children from their families. They sexually abuse them. They do ritual abuse things to them. So again, kind of this idea of first you bring them, you dehumanize them, you give them a fake death, and then a mock rebirth into Satan's clutches or the Illuminati or whatever. Right. And then essentially they become a sex slave, kind of almost an automaton for them until they themselves become a member of the cult. So that's actually an important point in that book, The Illuminati Sex Abuse Rituals on Audible, that the author says that he was an Illuminati agent whose job it was to kidnap and deprogram children to be sex slaves.
Mm. So the other things, the one thing that I had forgotten about this, now reviewing it, I forgot that a lot of this came from the WikiLeaks leaked emails from John Podesta.
Yeah, that
that they were combing through it and they were looking for whatever was in John Podesta's emails, and he had mentioned thanking somebody for the cheese pizza, or there was some like innocuous remark about cheese pizza that because it has the same initials as child pornography, somebody on 4chan thought that was what that was, and begun to spread this whole, like, again, self-substantiated, right? It's like we're now finding code words and hidden meaning in this this treasure trove of Podesta's emails, and it all of a sudden is a pedophilia ring.
Absolutely.
Led by the Democratic Party, which is insanity.
Well, it's not just the Democratic Party though. It is wealthy Republicans as well.
Oh,
the Bushes are involved, right? It's essentially a deep state kind of, think about the swamp, add a layer of kitty horrible stuff to it, right?
Lord.
And then it kind of morphed though. The idea has morphed now from so first it was Satanic Panics, then it was kind of this idea of the Illuminati, right, floating around the internet. Then it became Pizzagate, and now it has become QAnon, which is separate but similar. A lot of the same ideas are part of that as well. The QAnon conspiracy theory essentially is that there is someone in the Trump administration who has Q-level security clearance, which is supposed to be the highest level of clearance above the president, above everyone else. And
is that even a thing? First of all, can I ask that?
I don't know. I don't think so. But, it's like 007, right? Like, oh. And so the idea is that this person is deciding to go on an image board of cartoon frogs. And essentially, literally, like, 4chan was the website you went on to gross yourself out in middle school, right? Like, it is still, I would say, slightly better than Reddit because it doesn't take itself as seriously as Reddit does. But good God, anyone who's getting their information from 4chan, come on, guys. So the 4chan threads kind of started with the idea of QAnon being this person who's going on and leaking these ideas out.
It's anonymous, yeah.
And part of the beauty of it is that they are essentially like Nostradamus' quatrains almost. They are written in such an ambiguous way that you can read anything you want into them. And so a big part of this theory is that Donald Trump is kind of a businessman who was not involved in these satanic sex cult rituals, even though he hung out with all the same people. So I don't know how he ended up not getting invited to the parties.
He actually, yeah. All right.
But
yes,
he hung out with the same people that the Clintons hung out with, right? So it's like,
yeah,
that doesn't make a lot of sense
for a lot of it. But that's cool.
Whatever. So the idea is that he came in, discovered all this was happening, and is now attempting to take on the deep state, these child pornography rings, etc., from within the government, right? The calls coming from within the House. And so he is working with Robert Mueller to take on John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, George Soros, Obama, right? All of them. Everyone but, I guess, the people that he hung out with, even though they're all there too. So
he's working with Mueller.
Right. Mueller is not trying to take him down. Mueller and Trump are a tag team. Yes. Now listen. If all that other stuff was true, go Trump, yo. Like, take him down. You know what I mean? But it's
He's got a good cover story so far.
Great cover story. It's all of this sort of conspiracy though continuing, and it has not changed. It is the same satanic panic kind of story over and over again. And now we're not even, it's transitioned from a point of, we believe kids, we have to fight against Satanism, we have to whatever, right? Like the legal system almost going crazy, to now the public and let's not put, you can't kind of get around this fact. Disturbed individuals, people who are already likely violent or going to become violent, people who need help desperately, latching onto these conspiracies that are now widely available. They're much easier to get a hold of. And decide, my life to this point hasn't had meaning. This stuff I believe in, this is real. I am going to become a hero by, sending a weapon to a child porn ring leader. Or I am going to go to the pizza parlor where they're hiding the kids with a gun and demand that they get released. Or, God knows what's next.
So the thing that I thought was interesting about QAnon and about kind of the modern day conspiracies is is sort of this idea of Robert Mueller within QAnon, right? They don't really have anything to say on him. Like, conspiracy theories haven't stuck to him yet that I've been tracking to. And I'm kind of curious about that, because I would think that if you were going to put something together like this, this deep state shadowy figure who's sitting in quiet judgment, pulling up facts, and, is the spider at the center of the web, would be a really good linchpin. But it never sticks. It never comes up. It doesn't have any traction to it.
Well, it's everything
that I've read, right?
It's sort of an interesting marriage, because I think, before Donald Trump, right? A lot of these kind of conspiracies of, perverted parties and Satan worship and whatever, were still, they were always kind of a, part of the, I guess, religious conspiracy theory world, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the idea of these tremendous cabals controlling the earth and whatever, they were a part of both sides' conspiracy theories, right?
Yeah.
There was kind of, it was either an oil baron, or it was an oil baron, or it was a tech giant, or it was whatever. But in both cases, it was, they're coming after innocent people, and the innocent people tend to vote like I do, right?
Yes.
With this, it's kind of a subversion. I think actually, because of the political climate we're in today, where people, where people want to, I think we think that both sides are just as evil as the other, they're both evil, mm-hmm. right?
Yes.
They both have their problems, whatever. And so, this idea of kind of a, of there being still good people in the government, I think has to be a part of these conspiracies, because otherwise you would just fall into despair. I really I think it's interesting though, because like you said, I would not be surprised if Mueller's report comes out and says this stuff, whatever, he will become a part of this conspiracy theory, right? The next day they're going to be like, look, we found him in Tony Podesta's emails. Look,
if you spell it backwards, it's,
right.
Right. Yeah. I feel like it's one of the reasons that it doesn't have any traction is that he hasn't done, it's silence. Right?
Absolutely.
There's nothing to feed on.
Absolutely. It's radio silence. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of, with this type of thing, with QAnon, with whatever, the growth comes, oxygen feeds the fire. Right. And so I feel like you put it on the news, you start talking about more, even with Satanic Panic, Oprah's talking about you going on, it feeds the machine. And you can't build a narrative off of something that's not going to give you something to talk about. And I think that's a lot of you see that now. Cause I was very curious about that kind of weird, because if you look at QAnon, you're like, okay, if I put a certain lens on it, it makes, he's in there, he's fighting the good fight, and he's working with, and you're like, what, really? What? That's there's just something peculiar about it.
It's interesting.
In that front.
Honestly,
not the whole thing isn't crazy sauce, but, it's that to me is even an anomaly. We don't know what to do with Robert Mueller in our conspiracy world, right? We don't know what to do with him because he hasn't given us anything to, he's the shadowy figure, but he hasn't given us anything to work with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's extremely interesting. It really is kind of our thing. I think I don't know. It's hard. It's so hard to get a sense of, I guess, where does the panic go from here, right? Because I think I don't think it's so far fetched to say that this is another era, a new era of panics, right? I don't think that's so far out to say that.
No.
Now maybe that's because we are kind of entrenched in, I'm getting on arguments on Facebook UFO groups every day now. So, so maybe it's because we are entrenched in kind of that world.
People, first of all, just leave Chris alone. If there's a crazy one you want to pick the fight with, it's me.
But
I don't believe in them. I spell physics with a K. I don't care.
But
go ahead.
I mean, no, though, it's true. It's interesting to me that there is this, I think that there is this realm or this world where, you know, it seems much worse than it is, right? And that's why I think it's so important to, what's the word? I think that's why it's so important to kind of, you know, talk with someone who doesn't have your views, talk about something you have in common, right?
Yes.
Get, you know, just the world is not as bad as it seems right now. And it took us, you know, 75 minutes to get to that point. But, you know, really, though, I mean, it seems very scary. I thought this would be a great topic for Halloween just because of how scary I find it. You know, but it's, man, just, you know, grab a beer with someone you're friends with, talk about other stuff, get into it, you know, but this realm of conspiracy, I think the scariest thing about all this for me is the only way I think that we will come out of this is to start engaging in uncomfortable conversations with people who have other opinions than you, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You know, checking people when they say something ridiculous, even if it is something ridiculous that you would maybe tend to agree with the sentiment behind, right? You know, I mean, there have been far too many times where someone that I would otherwise agree with was like, you know, oh, you know, George W. Bush is a war criminal and, you know, whatever. And it's like, man, I don't know. You know, it just comes down to that, I think, sense of like, we got to come together, Marie. Was this, I don't know.
Well, I think a large part of how do you combat fear? How do you combat fear of it, especially is like so insidious that it can become a panic, is you have to question your own beliefs and what you're telling yourself too. Like if there's a certain amount of like self reflectivity that, you know, like I know what I believe in. I know what I hold dear, and I know what I believe in, and if but I think you always have to test that. You always have to kind of question that. You always have to question, is the reason I locked my car door when you know, a young black man walks by because I just wanted to start my car, or is it because inherently I was scared of him for no reason? I mean, I think you have to check yourself, because some of the things you're going to find out are not things that make you feel good.
No, they're going to be things that'll make you uncomfortable.
They're going to be things that make you feel bad. They're going to be things about you feel bad about yourself. But by starting to at least acknowledging them and acknowledging sort of like the monster is here, the monster's you. It's not somewhere else. It's in you, and you have to be able to start to see it. That, I think, is what breaks down the conspiracy theory a little bit, and it starts to like help check the things of like, well, this isn't rational because I created that. I created that fear, projected that, or I made an assumption about something because I wanted to feel right. But feeling right is not necessarily what's going to solve anything.
No.
It's my 2 cents.
Oh my goodness.
But you gotta sit down and carve some pumpkins, my people.
Yeah, it's Halloween!
You get out some candy, you get the fake teeth on, the vampire teeth.
Oh, it's all very exciting.
Oh, it's gonna be some good stuff.
All right.
It's good stuff.
Dear listeners, thank you so much for spending another year with the Mad Scientist podcast.
We love you.
We love you all so much. We will be back. We'll be back in another week with our next episode here on something a little bit lighter.
Something a little bit lighter than the soul-crushing stuff we normally talk about.
Wonderful.
Spooky. We get spooky.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again so much. Thank you again, dear listeners, for listening to the Mad Scientist podcast. I have been your host, Chris Cogswell, joined by my co-host,
Marie Mayhew.
If you'd like to contact the show, please send us an email at themadscientistpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. You can also follow us on Twitter at Mad Scientist Pod or at Team Giant Squid for Marie. And of course, you can see us on Facebook, on Instagram, and all over the internet as the Mad Scientist Podcast. And again, our logo is the one with the pumpkin head. so it's easy to see.
Mm-hmm.
If you've enjoyed the show tonight, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where the money that you give to us will help us to promote this show further, to make it better, and just to spend more time making it.
Yes, we love doing that.
We do love doing that. Our logo was designed by Carrie Shaheen. Our web design is done by Desdemona Howard.
Woohoo!
And our sound design is done by Jake Cardinal. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you. This has been a Damn It Chippy production.